שלום גידי,
מה קורה? וואי, אני צריך לחפש את הלינק. יש לי 3 זימונים עכשיו, 4 זימונים ביומן.
אתה שומע אותי עכשיו?
כן, כן. אתה שומע אותי?
כן, מעולה.
מצוין.
מה גידי, אתה מתחזק?
אה, סתם עצלנות. צריך לקפוץ לספר. אני נוהג לא להתגלח. כאילו, אני תמיד מתעצל, אומר, "טוב, אני אתגלח מחר, אין לי, לא היום, הבוקר אין לי זמן, אני אתגלח מהר, זה, טוב, כשאני אגיע לספר, שהוא כבר יגלח אותי על הדרך. ואז אני לא מגיע לספר, אני גם לא מגיע לספר.
תבוא אלינו, יש ספר בצ'ק פוינט. וצריך להגיד באיזה יום אתה מגיע, ואני סוגר לך תור. שלום משה.
הפרעתי לכם בשיחה ערה?
לא,
מה זה,
דיברנו על תספורת. הזמנתי את גידי לתספורת בצ'ק פוינט, יש ספר. אתה גם מוזמן משה, אבל נראה לי אתה יודע,
כן,
גידי
כן.
צריך את זה יותר.
הוא יכול לספר לי את הזקן.
היי,
בדיוק
טוב
אמרתי
לראות.
שאני תמיד אומר כזה, אני אתגלח, אין לי זמן להתגלח הבוקר, אני נכנס מהר, מתקלח ויוצא למשרד, אז בפעם הבאה שאני מגיע לספר, אני אגיד לו שיגלח אותי, ואז אני כבר איזה חודש לא הולך לספר, זה הבעיה.
ליבי ליבי, עוד רגע אני פה מוציא את הכינור שלי ומתחיל לשיר לך סרנדה.
זה הבעיה שעובדים מהבית, אני חייב להגיד לך, זה הבעיה, ברגע שאתה יוצא החוצה, לא היה לך בעיה ללכת לספר מתחת לעבודה שלך, זה לא
לא,
כזה...
אין ספר מתחת לעבודה, שתבין, אני עדיין הולך לספר באלעד, למרות שכבר עברנו לפתח תקווה באוגוסט, אני כאילו רגיל אליו, אתה יודע, יש את הצחוקים הפנימיים בינך לבין הספר שלך, וזה כאילו זה, אז אני עדיין נוסע, אני נוסע כשצריך, אז לקחת מונים מהיחידות דיור, אתה יודע מה זה, או לגבות כסף, כאילו דברים שאתה יודע, פעם ב...
אתה אומר, אתה לוקח עליו בזול, באלעד, הולך את הספר הכי בזול שמצאת.
תקשיב, זה כבר לא זול, זה נהיה איזה 60-65 שקל גם באלעד. מה זה, זה כולה מכונה וזה בקטנה.
רק כדי לסבר לך את האוזן, תספורת ילדים בהוד השרון, 100 שקל. לסדר לך את ה...
תספורת לכלב עולה 150 שקל. לי
יא,
בחיים לא כל כך הרבה.
כן, לגמרי. בסדר, טוב גידי, אתה רוצה לשתף, להתחיל לשתף ולראות שאנשים יכולים
רגע, עוד
לקחת שליטה?
שנייה.
אהלן
עכשיו אני
טל,
מבין.
מה שלומך?
טל, מה שלומכם?
אהלן, בסדר גמור,
אתה צריך לתת לי הרשאה לשתף.
בוודאי.
טל, מה קורה עם עופר? טל.
אני אתן בדיקה איתו.
שלך גידי.
אחת.
אני גם הופך אותך לקורס כמובן.
מעולה.
הבנתי עדיין מה הסיפור של הלינקים המיוחדים לפרטיסיפנטים, זה לא נותן אופציה.
אני אעביר. מעולה. ונשים את זה רגע כשר. כזה. סלייד שם. כל עכשיו אתם רואים את זה בסדר, נכון?
כן,
מעולה. אז יאללה, אז בוא נתחיל. אז לפי הסדר, אז עופר הוא הראשון, הוא יגיע עוד מעט, נעשה את המשחק הזה איתו. משה, עכשיו התור שלך, אני בעצם נותן לך רימוט קונטרול, ופשוט תעביר סליידים, אחד קדימה, אחד אחורה. שים לב שכשאתה מקליק, לפעמים לוקח את זה כזה כמה מיליסקנד עד שנייה, אם תקליק שניים פשוט זה יעבור, זאת אומרת אם לא תחכה זה ימשיך הלאה מן הסתם, אז קח את הזמן.
אני יכול לעשות גם בק.
אתה או כפתור או במקלדת בחיצים, אחד אחורה.
שנייה, אני אעבור לחצים. כן, אוקיי, חצים עדיף פה בק שלי.
הכי פשוט כזה, בדיוק. בסדר, ובעצם כשאתה מסיים את החלק שלך, אז אני אקח ממך חזרה את הרימוט קונטרול, ואני אעביר אותו ל...
בסדר, תראה לי שנייה איך הקלפים שלי נראים, אני רוצה לוודא שלא יהיה...
כן, כן, עוד שנייה, נעשה את שני הדברים, זה. טל, עכשיו תורך.
אה,
פשוט על המקלדת, כאילו על החיצים, קדימה, אחורה, או ימינה, שמאלה.
זה באמת עובד. נכון, זה
ושים לב עוד פעם, אתה מקליק, לפעמים דיליי פה, שם, תקליק אחד, חכה, כאילו ספור בלב ככה, 1, 2,
כן,
3.
כן, אני עשיתי את הספירות, אני רואה את זה.
בסדר, זה פשוט.
אחלה.
מעולה. מצוין, אז אני אקח לך חזרה את הרימוט קונטרול רגע. ועכשיו נעבור רגע לסליידים שלכם, אחר כך נעבור ליומן של עופר. יופי. אז משה, זה שלך.
בסדר גמור, לא נראה
כן,
לי.
נשאר לך, עוד פעם, כשאני מעתיק, אני מעתיק את זה עם העיצוב שלכם, אין לי סיבה לגנוב את העיצוב.
אני
או
סומך
לעכב
עליך
את כל העיצוב.
ב100%, ולמרות זאת אני אעשה עוד
לא, לא,
משהו.
זה מצוין, זה, אתה יודע, זה better safe than sorry.
כן, אבל לפעמים פשוט יש הבדלים בין הפאורפוינט, סליידס, הלוך
אז יש,
חזור.
יש הבדלים, טל, בינך לבין עופר, נראה לי בצבע הכחול משהו קצת, לדעתי פשוט היה לכם כנראה מין
כן,
גרסאות.
אני בטכנולוגיה, אני לא בעיצוב.
הבנתי.
גידי מראה פה סימנים של זה, אולי פספסת
לא, כי
את...
בהתחלה כשנכנסתי לסלייד הראשון של שניכם, זה היה נראה לי לא אותו כחול, אתה רואה, זה...
זה לא אותו כחול,
אני
נכון.
הייתי שם co-founder עם הכף, אני חייב להגיד, אבל זה שכולכם, זה קופץ לי ככה בעין.
כן. השאלה איך כותבים את זה רגע, בוא נראה איך הוא כתב את זה בסלייד הבא. פה הוא לא כתב זה. אז זה לא. מופיע אצלך האמת. רגע, גם בסלייד האחרון שלו נראה אם הוא כתב בסוף, אני לא זוכר מי כזה questions זה כבר שלך. פה כן
אני-
כתוב זה ככה. אה, טל, אתה ילד טוב ירושלים. טל, פרסמת פעם מחקרים?
המון מחקרים.
לא, מאמרים, אבל כאילו לא את המחקר כולו, אלא כמאמרים.
אה, כאילו מאמרים, כאילו כנסים, אני מרצה באוניברסיטה בגרמניה.
לא, כי סתם הייתי אתמול עם אשתי, אשתי מסיימת את הדוקטורט שלה, על מגדר, לא, כאילו תחום משעמם בעיניי לפחות. אז אתמול היינו באוניברסיטה, כאילו בר אילן עושים איזה טקס, כל פעם כל חצי שנה עושים טקס, כל מי שפרסם מאמרים, ומקבלים על זה פרס וכל מיני שטויות כאלה, אז סתם סקרן אותי לדעת, אם בעוד מקומות זה ככה.
אה, שרק בשנה האחרונה פרסמתי איזה 3.
הבנתי. עכשיו אתם לא רואים את השare, נכון?
עכשיו אנחנו רואים את הפוסטר.
זאת אומרת, עדיין רואים את השare.
עדיין רואים את השם, כן.
לא סתם, אני רוצה לראות, כי אם אני עובר רגע למסע אחר, כי אני רוצה כן להקריא כל מיני דברים שכתבתי בצד, על כאילו...
תוכל לבדוק אם עופר גם מגיע לפני קצת, שנוכל
כן,
לעשות את זה איתו?
אני מנסה רגע לתפוס אותו.
תודה.
דרך אגב, משה, אתם קבעתם את זה עכשיו במקביל לקבוצת מחקר של ה-AI Control Working Group של ה-Cloud Security Alliance.
לא שמעתי את ההתחלה שאתה אומר, מה עכשיו עשינו? היוזמה של ה-AI היא יוזמה של בערך בת שנה, אבל ה-CSA שמה עליה את כל הקלפים, מה שנקרא.
לא, אני אומר, אני חלק מהקבוצת
אה,
מחקר, זה יצא שזה בדיוק על ההרצאה שלי.
מה-working group, אוקיי. מי מוביל את ה-working group הזה?
אמ, כמובן יש את כל החבר'ה של ג'ייסון קלינטון וגם,
מהמם.
אבל ספציפית את ה-Working Group שלי, זה הבחור של ה-Opswot 10 של ה-LLM, שעכשיו פרסם את הספר.
לא בעולם הזה. זה לא אומר לי הבחור, זה לא אומר לי כלום. אני
משה,
מחכה
שלח לי רגע בטקסט, מה
לאתר
אתה
של
רוצה שאני
ה-CSA.
אגיד, איך להציג אותך?
סליחה,
בטח. בזה.
דיברת אליי?
כן, כן, שלח לי רגע טקסט, כאילו איך להציג אותך.
כן,
אה,
אונג.
Chairman Cloud Security Alliance ישראל. אתה מחפש משהו מעבר?
רק את זה?
כן, נראה לי, אני אציג את עצמי בהמשך. תראה לי את השנייה את השקפים שלי, יש לי שם שקף על עצמי.
נראה לי שכן, אבל שנייה אחת.
שקף על ה-CSA.
כן, כן, רגע. פעם היה כזה שאפשר ישר לקפוץ בסדר, פשוט ככה. זה.
אוקיי, כן, אז אני אציג את עצמי, רק תגיד CSA.
אני עדיין, זה סבבה, אז רק את ה-CSA.
אוקיי. אז איזה working group אתה טל? כי אני רואה עכשיו שיש את ה-AI Safety Initiative, אבל יש לי הרגשה שזו לא היחידה. טל? אתה
הוא
במיוט.
יכול להיות שהוא בשיחת טלפון או משהו כרגע.
אה.
לא, אני פשוט מנסה לתפוס את עופר.
מצוין.
אני גם מפרסם עכשיו ברשתות חברתיות שאנחנו עוד מעט מתחילים, ושאנשים יכולים להצטרף.
בונז'ור,
שלום עופר,
מה העניינים?
בסדר גמור, כמו סבא.
כמו סבבה ביאן. זהו, זה כל מה שאני יודע וגם זה גרוע. מה העניינים?
יש עוד כמה מילים של התחלות, של בחורות שאני
כן,
יודע, אבל זה לא יעבוד איתך.
כן, זה מספיק בשביל ללכת מהבר. העניין שלא עשיתי את זה לא יודע, 50 שנה האחרונות, אז אולי עכשיו נתחיל.
לא נראה לי כזה זקן.
די זה כן.
עכשיו זה מתבקש שנשאל אותך כמה זקן.
47.
לא, זה לא כזה זקן.
די.
אנחנו
לא יודע,
באותו הצop.
בעיני הילדים זה זקן, הם כבר קוראים לי סבא בני.
בעיני הילדים שלך אתה זקן, גם אם אתה היית בן שנה, שנה
זה
יותר
נכון.
מהם.
זה נכון. רגע, כל השקפים אצלכם.
כן, 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 רגע אחד, נעשה עוד
תגידי
פעם.
ליאור את הביו שלי ושל עופר יש לכם או לשלוח
כן,
לכם?
כן, כן, זה כבר יש לנו.
טוב.
רגע אחד, נעשה פשוט את השאר הכל מחדש עוד פעם רגע במסך נפרד לגמרי. עכשיו תגידו לי אם זה מה שאתם באמת רואים, שרס רגע.
רגע, אז דמו אנחנו לא מראים, נכון? אני לא יכול לשתף מסך שלי.
נכון.
אוקיי.
אז עופר, בוא נעשה רגע איתך תרגול שעשינו כבר עם טל ועם משה. זה בעצם התרגול של לשלוט במסך שלי מרחוק. אז יש לך עכשיו את ההרשאה, חיצים ימינה או שמאלה או למעלה למטה, אתה יכול להעביר שקפים, תראה שזה עובד. ושוב אני מזכיר, קליק אחד, תן איזה 1, 2, 3 כזה בלב.
קליק למעלה או למטה, אתה אומר.
כן. אתה
חיצים.
צריך עוד פעם, קודם כל שהעכבר שלך יהיה בתוך החלון הזה.
העכבר בתוך, אבל העכבר לא עושה כלום.
לא, לא, אני אומר, תלחץ רגע עם העכבר לתוך החלון של הזום, כדי שאתה תהיה בפוקוס על הזום, ואז...
אני בתוך הזום, אני לוחץ ולא קורה כלום. אני רואה את העכבר.
הנה.
או. הופ.
בסדר,
הופ.
עשינו פשוט אחד ותחכה, כי עוד פעם, אם תעשה יותר מדי מהר, אז לפעמים זה יריץ פשוט 2, 3 קדימה, גם
נהדר.
בלי... זה הכל.
טכנולוגיית חלל. רגע, אז אולי בהרצאה אני פשוט אדבר על הטכנולוגיה הזאת, שאפשר להעביר
יאללה,
שקפים מרחוק.
בכיף.
זה יותר רציני מ-AI. AI זה סתם שטויות. קדימה.
זה- טל סתם בזבז על זה מלא זמן.
סתם, מה זה AI? אתה כותב קצת קוד, מה זה מעניין? תראה איזה יופי זה עובר שקפים.
Guys, I can see people are joining. Hello, Yoni. Thank you for joining. We are doing some technical checks, and we'll start at 5 p.m. Israel time. So 6 more minutes. Grab your favorite drink. We'll start in a few minutes.
אוקיי.
Okay. I will also publish in social media. We are starting.
Okay. Thanks for those that starting to show up. Always good to show up on time or even before. 4 minutes and we'll start. Quickly grab your favorite drink, whether it's your morning one, coffee, etc., or beer, or just water. Choose your poison wisely.
Hello, Ivan. Hello, Erez. Thank you for joining. As Gidi said, we prepare a very interesting meetup today.
Okay, so while we wait, so for those that are living here in Israel, how was your day, Moshe?
A pretty relaxed day. Working the entire day on this presentation.
And Ofer, you're located in the States, right?
Yes, in Florida.
In Florida. Lots of sun.
A lot of sun, yes. Compared to the other places in the US right now, which is freezing cold, here today is in Fahrenheit is around 70, in Celsius is around 20 degrees. So can't complain.
And Tal, what about you? Where are you from? Tal, I think went quickly to bring his
Yeah,
own.
I am from Tel Aviv.
So you are in Tel Aviv right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have the same weather that we share. How was your day? So far, so good.
So if we are in to chit chat, maybe Tal, give us a couple of words about the Cloud Security Alliance AI working group that you're part of.
Yeah, that's a nice idea.
Yeah, so basically, all the initiative started from the September event that was held in Seattle.
Have you been there?
Yeah, I've been there. We actually, Reco was the sponsorship of this day.
And I missed you somehow.
Yeah.
And there weren't too many Israelis, so I wonder how I missed you guys. Okay.
Yeah, we know cyber. Yeah. So since then, they are currently running in parallel around 4 groups. One for the AI control, one for the AI risk, one for the compliance, regulation, and I don't remember the first one. And we are currently working on definition and stuff, like actually phrasing everything and working on the framework.
So out of those 4 working groups, which one do you belong?
AI control.
Okay. So it's an AI technology and risk, AI governance and compliance, AI controls, and AI organizational responsibilities, correct?
Yeah.
It's starting to be heavy rain here. Do you hear the rain on my screen or on my mic, or is it okay?
No, it's okay.
No? Okay.
It's also raining here, but I hardly hear it. If you haven't told me, I wouldn't look back to see that it's raining. Okay, so more people are coming. We are going to start in, I don't know, 2-3 minutes maybe, give the chance to a few more people to join. And the session will be recorded. And later on, of course, we will share it with you all. So 2-3 more minutes, and then we'll go through the agenda, some cool stuff, and then we'll start with the interesting stuff, which is going to be cool as well. Just wait and see. Okay, so 1 more minute and then start. Okay. Half a minute and we'll start. If you don't have yet your favorite drink next to you, quickly go and grab one. FYI, in Florida, you should drink a lot because it's sunny.
Yeah, it is.
Good reason why we should take a drink. Okay, we are about to start. Later on, people probably will join more. So, hello everyone. Thanks for joining today's meetup. The meetup is going to be about SSPM, but not just a boring regular one more SSPM. In this case, we are going to see why SaaS security is going to be the next big thing and why SSPM should be much more sophisticated than what you think. And we'll see how we are enlisting Gen AI to do so if we really want to secure our organization. On the agenda for today, right after my short speak, is the CEO of Reco, Ofer Klein, is going to show us how to resolve SaaS security issues with Gen AI, or basically how to enlist SSPMs for Gen AI. Following that, Moshe Ferber, the chairman of the Cloud Security Alliance in Israel, is going to tell us about the foundation of cloud monitoring. So we will also learn a bit about what is SSPM, just in case you have no clue or not enough information about it. And the finale is going to be presented by Tal Shapira. He's also one of the co-founders of Reco, and he has a PhD. And he is going to speak about his expertise, which is AI in the hands of the cyber protectors. Because we all know that maybe we are not there yet already, already fully, but our attackers definitely are there and they're using it. So there is no reason for us not to enlist it to ourselves as well. At any point in the session, feel free to ask questions via the Q&A section. And after each and every one of those sessions, we are going to read those questions and allow the panelists to present their answers. If time won't allow answering all the questions, please wait till the end of the entire meetup and we will go through the remaining questions and answer them. And if needed, we can also send you the answers later on by email, or you can approach any one of the speakers directly via the LinkedIn, etc. You will see that they are presenting it by the end of each of their presentations. Again, the session will be recorded and will be shared later on with you. And with that, let's almost start. So a moment before we start, we are going to suggest that you will join us in the application security meetups. And if so, you are going to win a nice prize. So the QR code that currently on the screen is for you to use and participate in that one and win the swag. And Leo will also put that one on the chat, so you can also click on the link if you missed that QR code. And now that we finalized all those things, let's start with the really interesting stuff. So Ofer Klein. So if you're not familiar with Ofer or you missed something about Ofer so far, Ofer is the CEO and the co-founder of Reco. And besides that, he is a former Israeli pilot, a serial entrepreneur with a vast experience in building and growing go-to-market teams with SaaS companies in the US. He's passionate about leading solutions for the distributor workspace. And with that, Ofer, the screen is yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gidi. Hi, everyone. Super happy to be here. Thank you for having us. My name is Ofer Klein, co-founder and CEO of Reco, as you heard, based in Central Florida, originally from Israel, Tel Aviv. Let me share with you a little bit about the high level of the company and then sharing some insights about SaaS security in general. How can AI help And then throughout this meetup, you will hear more details about the AI from Tal, my co-founder and CTO of the company. So the company, we started it 3 years ago. It's a US-based company where the AI and technology is based in Israel. My background is I flew helicopters in the Air Force. Then I had another startup after several years in the Israeli defense electronic area. I started another company, moved to the US 6 years ago, and started this company with Gal and Tal 3 years ago. Co-founders, just in high level, Tal will share more about himself, coming from the Israeli FBI, where the main story behind the company is that the challenge they faced is basically the bad guys started to encrypt data, and you cannot read this data in order to understand hostile activities. And basically the solution that was founded there by Tal and his team was a metadata graph that analyzes millions and millions of interactions. And just by understanding those interactions, who is communicating with whom and how, they could effectively understand what is happening when and where. They won the Israeli Defense Award with the president, and now we basically took that concept into helping the modern enterprise to securely use SaaS applications and the SaaS environment in general. We are backed by these investors, as you see on the screen, raised about $40 million, and up to date from Insight Partners, Air Ventures, Bolsat, Angular, and a bunch of others. So let's start to dive deeper, and I'll have time to questions. So if you have any questions, please, or comments, please add them to the chat, and happy to interact either during the presentation or right after. So the SaaS environment has changed dramatically, where more than 95% of new software is written either on cloud or SaaS. A few years ago, the average was about 30 SaaS applications. Now it's more than 300. Actually, the record that we have with one of our customers is 11,000 apps in one company, which means this is exploding, and it's exploding because of the value it produces. So I am much more productive if I'm using those applications, especially now the new generation of generative AI applications. So why shouldn't I use it as a marketing, sales, or even a developer? And the other side of it is, if you do that without any governance, any visibility, any control, it introduces a lot of risk. And let me give you one example from a company we work with. It's a public company. Someone installed an AI app connected to their Zoom. So far, that's great. It transcripts all the call. You become much more productive. The problem was that because of misconfiguration in both the app, the AI app, and Zoom, these transcripts were basically exposed to the entire company. Pre-earning calls, board meetings, all of the fun stuff. And because of our system, basically they could understand of this misconfiguration and deal with it. So the challenge here is one element: you cannot block the company anymore. You cannot go back to on-prem because SaaS is there and it's exploding. And the other side, how can you do it in a much more responsible and governed way? Unfortunately, we start seeing the bad guys moving from attacking the cloud, attacking the devices. They are starting more and more rapidly to attack through this SaaS surface. And you see here a few examples. I'll just double click on one of them, and Tal will drill down even further. The MGM attack, where basically the reported outcome was $180 million in damage, in basically loss of income. And we know behind the scenes, it's more than $1 billion of loss of revenue. And we will touch on that, how and what happened there. The vast majority of those breaches are because of configuration. Basically, your doors and windows to your house are either open to everybody or not configured correctly. So it imposes risk. And the other part are the people, the users. People are actually logging in, using those systems, admins of those systems. And the combination of both of them is the holy grail. When you go into the AI apps, you see today, the last report was 76% of modern enterprises are using some form of generative AI as a strategic element of their business, which means it could be replacing my customer success. It could be providing better service. It could be accelerating processes or saving money. So now you have a new layer that is created in those environments that if this layer is breached, the business is impacted dramatically. Unlike a few years ago, if you say, okay, someone just breached my, I don't know, Adobe PDF documents, I don't really care. So the combination of using more and more, providing more value, and then the value impact once something bad happens is significant, attracts a lot of bad guys into this area, and this area is not well protected today. So if you look at the left side, cloud security like Wiz, Palo Alto, and others, you have endpoint devices, you have on-prem detection, network detection. The right side is still left behind today, and it's very early on in the journey of understanding what you have, being able to understand what is right and what is wrong, and then to prevent the data from being leaked, prevent this suspicious and risky access in a very effective way. Another interesting part that you find in SaaS, and you don't find it the same as other areas, is if I'm a security expert in a company, I don't even own those systems. So Amanda is the admin of Salesforce, Joe is the admin of Slack, someone else is the admin of Zoom or Workday, and now I need to go between all of these people and to understand what they do. Sometimes I don't even have access, and to understand what is right and what is wrong in a very effective way. So the challenge is not only to get access, is the how do you operate it inside an organization without friction. So let's double click on the MGM incident. Again, super high level. Tal will double down on that in a much more detailed way in his presentation later in this meetup. So it started with a phishing attack or social engineering. By the way, this social engineering of I'm your friend, give me your password or something like that becomes more and more sophisticated, because if I'm using AI, I can really be your friend. I know everything about you from Salesforce, from Facebook, from LinkedIn, from many other places. And you can trust me much easier and give me either your credentials or anything that I need. They got in. The first thing they did is reset the MFA, the multi-factor authentication, basically the second device authentication. Once they did that, they moved on to create high privilege user, which means now I'm an admin of this system, and now I basically can do whatever I want. The next step was getting into the payment system and shutting it down. So if you think of MGM, how much money they make every hour, shutting down the payment system at the casino, hotels, whatever, is a huge impact on their business. Caesar Palace, by the way, paid $15 million, 15 after a few hours, and MGM said no, I'm fine, and the impact was dramatic. So if you think of it, you have a few steps that the bad guys are moving through. From MFA, you reset the password, you create an admin or high privilege user, your behavior is not normal. How can you track that across all of your main tools in a very effective way? And the answer is, as you can imagine, is AI and machine learning. So what Reco provides, and I will double down more on that in the next few slides, we understood that just doing it faster and better manually is not a little worse, it's just not possible. Because you have hundreds of apps, you have thousands of people. We have a company we work with, which is 750,000 people. Thousands of different apps. There is no chance of doing that manually. How can I discover in a very effective way through a machine learning and AI engine, control, which means getting those alerts in near real time and understanding what is right, what is wrong, and then protect. shutting those doors and windows to the house, which is configure your Salesforce correctly, understand if something is wrong and what, and basically who has access that they shouldn't have to those systems. So let me give you a few examples. These are just super high-level things that AI can do. And again, Tal, the entire presentation is about the, as we call in Hebrew, the tachlis way of the tangible way of implementing that into the technology. From understanding who you are, I have offer logging into GitHub, and then offer logging into Salesforce, and another offer logging into Microsoft. Is it one person or 3 different people? How do you mesh those identities together through this graph? The second thing is understanding applications. The days of saying I have 50 integrations, 100 integrations, 200 integrations, yes, it's nice, but it's not even close to what I have. In a good day, it's going to be 10% of what I have. How can you effectively, automatically understand what I have in my organization? What is it? Is this an AI app? Is this sales app? Is this high risk, low risk? What is it? In order to take action, and then obviously to automate. And the last part I'm going to touch here briefly is the anomaly behavior. Some of you might know the term UEBA, which is basically understanding what, behavior analytics. And the old concept of UEBA was, I'm going to set rules. This is right. This is wrong. You have to work from the office. If you sent an email or you logged into the system at 3 a.m., obviously you're a hacker and something is wrong. And guess what? It doesn't make sense in remote work anymore, and it doesn't make sense in so many different SaaS applications. So something needs to understand what is a normal behavior, to learn, and then to adopt it into the controls in a very effective way. And I'll give you an example in one of the next slides from one of our customers. Again, Tal will double down more on the AI. So if you're interested on how could this be implemented, wait until the end of the meetup. It's going to be very, very interesting. So let's zoom into identities in the new world of SaaS. An identity used to be a person, Joe, or Mary, or whomever the person is. It could be he or she could be an employee or contractor. And now you're starting to have a new form of identities, which are machine identities. It could be an app. It could be a service account. You start seeing data flowing from app to app, from service account outside, etc., not only generated by people. So we understood that the AI needs to understand everybody, which is people as well as machine services, to understand their privileges. If you are the admin of 5 main systems, your impact on the company is much bigger than if you just joined the company yesterday and you have no access to nothing. So in the identity space, this is, by the way, what we do in the graph, continuously analyze who are those identities, what are they connected to, or who are they connected to, and take actions. Take action could be, you're an admin of Salesforce, you did not log in for 6 months, why do you still need the access, and automatically revoke it, for example. And this is a more tangible example of what can you do when you understand everything about an identity. So let's take this example of Justin Blair. You know all of the apps that he's using. You know all of the admin permissions this person has. In this case, this person is leaving the company, and he still has admin access and starting, for example, downloading or deleting data. An example we have from one of our customers, a contractor that was basically an admin on Salesforce, moved out and basically started to work with a competitor. After about 6 months, he started to log in again to this Salesforce and touching data, downloading data, etc. So the first touch, in this case through Reco, is that you see that someone that shouldn't be there, that wasn't there for a lot of time, that left the company, is now accessing something he shouldn't. So the identity and access governance is all about reducing the attack surface on the identity, access, admins, etc. The second part of it, for those of you that work in public companies, SOX compliance actually requires to understand access all the time and over access as well. Today, in most of the companies, it's done manually, and through this process, basically, it is streamlined and automated. Let me give you an example of behind the scenes about the application space. So we talked now about identity from the human perspective, now from the machine perspective. So this is an example of how this is Google, and I connected a bunch of apps to Google. Between us, you could go to Google, you can search for it in your Google suite, and you will find it. Great. But one of your daughter companies is also using Microsoft. So there is a similar graph of those apps connected to Microsoft. And then you have a similar graph connected to Salesforce. Because I work in sales, I connected an app to Salesforce. I did not connect it to Google or Microsoft. The same thing, now you have the same element from the people perspective. And if you think about it iteratively, basically creating here the graph, the heartbeat of the company, that you can understand every person with all of the apps he or she has, and every app, all the people that are connected, all the pieces of data, etc., in one single pane of glass. So this is how the AI and machine learning are working behind the scenes. And then again, Tal will explain you more sophisticated stuff on how this is done and the implications. I will stop in a few slides for questions, so please add them to the chat, and I'll stop and answer them. So when you think of what you just saw in the graphs from the applications perspective, how can I know every app in my organization? What is it? Who is using them? And let's take it with the angle of AI apps. We have a very embarrassing question we ask on every onboarding. Do you know every AI app in your company and who is using it? And it's embarrassing because you cannot know. And the answer is always no. So in this case, basically aggregating from this graph, every app connected to one of your main tools, Microsoft, Google, app to app, Slack, Zoom, Salesforce, etc. And then filtering that, we have, in this case, an AI and machine learning algorithm that we trained over tens of thousands of apps to automatically understand what is this app, what is the risk based on permissions, in order to be able to filter and prioritize. In this case, I want to know every AI app I have in the company, and within a few seconds and a few clicks, I get, in this case, 26 different apps with a list of permissions and who is using them. Okay, what is it connected to? So basically everything I need to know in order to take decisions, and obviously one click deeper gets me the details of that application, who is using it, what are the permissions, etc. The same thing we're doing for posture and compliance, for the app governance, as you saw now, for the identity access, as you saw one example, and always, obviously, a list of controls that comes out of the box that allows actually seamless operation. How seamless? Usually we save about 70 to 80% time of the team compared to any other SSPM and SaaS security tool that we're using. Last portion here, posture. Again, the doors and windows of your SaaS tools. For example, you can allow in Salesforce to share every data publicly. Publicly mean exposed to the internet. You can allow login to try their password again and again and again, infinite number of tries, which means a bot could eventually break into your system. So there are dozens and dozens of checks into each one of those that automatically running through those processes and updating them and making sure they stay the same. Going back to MGM, with MGM configuration drift alert could say, ta-da, an admin is changing, in this case, it was his MFA. A new high privilege user admin was created for this system. An anomaly behavior was detected on the system, so each one of them could basically allow them to stop the attackers. I won't get into details unless you have more questions around it, but the concept is super simple. Connecting on metadata, read-only to those tools. The average is 5 to 8 minutes to onboard a new customer. Providing the value, connecting to the existing tools, like automation tools, SIEMs, etc., ticketing systems, in order to execute the outcome. Analyzed so far more than $100 billion interactions and thousands of different types of violations. So the system is very robust. Again, thanks to the AI behind the scenes. If you try to do it with manual work, there's no chance. So I'll stop after this slide and basically, just a short summary of the SaaS is growing in an exponential way in the last at least a year and a half. And the main reason it creates more value, the value is generated through those apps and especially the AI apps. The bad guys are starting to find it more and more. Regulation is still not there. So something needs to protect it. And we truly believe that this something is not going to be hiring 2 or 3 more people. It needs to be something completely different, like an AI and machine learning solution. So I'll stop here for questions. Thank you so much so far. How should we map? I'm just going over the questions.
Yeah, it for you, and then make sure that we've answered everyone. So Joss asks,
yeah,
how would you map the inventory of SaaS apps and data protection controls? And he gives some examples like SSO, MFA, monitoring, encryption, and a few others probably.
Yeah. So let me try to do something super challenging and go back in the slides.
1 second. Let me give you again the control. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you. So there are two steps here. One of them is that we connect through an API, read-only, metadata only, to the core. The core could be Microsoft collaboration, which is called the Microsoft Graph. It could be the Google Suite. It could be Okta, or the 3 of them. Through that, we understand most of those applications. And then drilling down on the posture, like you mentioned, SSO, MFA, encryption, then we have a dedicated integration, a dedicated API into those core apps. In this case, in this example, if you have a few examples like Zoom, Salesforce, Slack, Monday.com, GitHub, etc. So you have a few clicks, you connect with an API, you understand the provisioning, which is the configuration. We also take from there the logins to allow to understand the access and the behavior. And then we aggregate all of that together in a graph to understand, here is an app. It is connected to 20 additional apps. We add it to the graph. It is connected to 105 people, and 3 of them are admins. And this is the configuration.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Next question is, 1 second. Okay, another one by Joss. 1 second.
There's another one also in the chat window, not in the Q&A.
1 second. So how can we obtain visibility into the business processes and sensitive data that are under attack?
Yeah, so that's a great question.
It's like missing backup or backup under attack. I mean, someone, wrongly or unauthorizedly trying to access it?
Yeah. So this is a great question, because in order to do that, you need first and foremost to understand what is an attack vector. You need to then map it out into specific controls. For example, you do 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then 4, and then you have to set these controls and to get alerts in real time. So a part of what we do here, we have a dedicated team that is basically taking those attack vectors. By the way, some of them are also being published by the vendors. For example, Okta, 6 months before the MGM, they published a list of checks. These are the things you should do in order to prevent, guess what, this MGM attack. So sometimes it's coming from the vendors. Sometimes we explore it by ourselves or implement attack vectors into policies. And then we can detect in near real time a list of activities that could impact something very, very bad. Let me give you an example from the last few weeks. Again, from one of the customers, we detected that someone is trying to do factory reset for the Okta. Factory reset for the Okta, for those who are not in the details, is basically forget everything. Everybody can have access to everything. Good luck. Which is not recommended. Let's put it that way. We detected it. It could come from a mistake, and it could come from a starting of attack vector that then doing other things. So first, nobody logged into Okta and it wasn't factory reset. The team saw it in near real time and basically stopped it. It was someone that is basically trying to do something with the Okta service people that mistakenly almost resetted the entire Okta. Okay, so the same thing you do for attacks.
I'll try to also add, maybe it's related to some other types of products, Joss. For example, when you speak about backup, again, you gave it as an example, so it really depends. If it's a backup of SaaS, so again, the vendor is supposed to back it up. In a second, I'll ask you something else offer about that one. But for IaaS and PaaS, obviously you have the CSPMs that basically can monitor whether your workloads or buckets or managed databases are installed or not. In this case, it's for SaaS, not for infrastructure or platform. So, but let me ask you, Ofer, about that one, and take it further. Take Josh's question further. For example, Salesforce provides you built-in backup. So if their servers are going down, if their data centers are burning to, I don't know, whatever, they supposed to restore your data from scratch. But what if one of your users, an angry salesman or someone stupidly did it, or an hacker tries now to delete all the contacts, all the leads that you have on Salesforce? Do you have, for example, a way to see that a mass download or a mass deletion, bulk actions, things like this are happening, and either stop them or at least trigger immediate alert?
The answer is yes, and also depends on the app and the API they expose. So in Salesforce specifically, you have one element is snooping on data. Again, terrifying statistics from the US, 70% of people leaving the company take some data from Salesforce before they leave. Obviously, they don't steal anything. They just want to be better in the next company. So one thing is snooping on data. I access, shut it down, access, shut it down. It's called snooping. Massively, a lot of times leaving employees, and then deleting data, downloading data. So all of those things are tracked. Again, depending on the API. In Salesforce specifically, you can see most of it on Microsoft, on Google, and others. And then you can get a near real-time alert to understand what's happening, investigate, and take action.
Another question, and then again, that might be relevant to the one that you currently answered. Can you expand more on how SaaS apps used by the organization are discovered? So basically, I assume that the question is, how do you connect? How do you discover all the apps, and whether you can actually integrate with all of them or bring information from all of them?
Perfect. Can you give me access again, please? So
Yes,
I'm just going a few slides back. Thank you. So let's go to this one. So the way we do it, let's take a company. Most most of the big organizations, they have Microsoft, some of them have Google as well. The numbers in the market today is 83-17. And then let's say you have Slack and Salesforce, and obviously you have others, okay? So we connect with an API to Microsoft and with an API to Google. Again, it's a read-only, metadata only. I do not write anything. We get all of the logins, all of the apps that are listed in SSO, in single sign-on, to these apps. In this case, 451 on Microsoft, and 350 that you see here on Google. Then we also go to the next level and ask Salesforce, do you have applications that are connected directly to you? And we add them. The same for every other app. And now we aggregate all of that together. And by adding it together, you get either applications that formally you got a request from to IT, this app was approved, and you are using Figma as part of your work. Great. Connected to your Microsoft, all good. But also applications that as a salesperson, I don't care about IT, I just connected it to Salesforce, I asked nobody. And also applications that through an email and password, I went into OpenAI and say, offer at Reco, and this is my password. It's called Shadow IT. So all of them together are aggregated in one place. And then we run an algorithm on top of them to ask, what is this app? What are the permissions this app is taking from Microsoft or Google? Reading files, writing data, sending emails, etc. And assess the risk accordingly.
Peter asks also, how do one create SaaS apps? But I assume in this case, not create like how to develop a SaaS application, but how to connect to it. So again, you mentioned it before. And can you say something about the coverage in general? I mean, does your and other SSPM in general, I mean, does it mean, or do you have to cover everything, even any, basic regular SaaS, or only those that are really, really important, like GitHub, Salesforce, etc.? So
Yeah.
what would be even the approach when, implementing or when choosing SSPM?
So that's a great point. And actually there is an AI layer here as well, a layer angle as well. So there are a few layers. First, you should understand everything you have, which could be tens of thousands of apps through the process I just mentioned. Now I have, let's say 10, maybe 20 core apps, ServiceNow, Salesforce, etc., that I need to connect to. And each company, a lot of times you hear, oh yes, but I'm using this app, which is pretty rare, and I'm using this app. There's no chance for any company to have tens of thousands of integrations to all of them. So we just launched it a few weeks ago. We call it the Application Factory, which is allowing no-code integration on our end, that integrations into a new app that took between 2 to 3 months before that. The average now is between 1 to 2 days. And a very, very complex app takes between 1 to 2 weeks. So basically, you start with everything you need. Yeah, go ahead. You wanted to ask something?
So is it something that the end user needs to work on it, or is it something that you still need to provide?
We provide those integrations as those icons connecting the APIs. The great news is that first, you have between 5 to 20 core apps in a normal organization that are really important. And then you have this long tail. And dealing with that, with this new no-code integration on our end, allows to say, oh, you need this? No worries. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, you'll have it by next week. So even if there's something that is missing, it's really easy to implement.
So to continue my question, or the elaboration on the question that Peter asked, I'm currently working on my own SSPM project, let's say. Basically, what you're saying is that I first need to discover what are the SaaS platforms that I have and choose what are the core SaaS platforms that I'm using, or define what should be the core systems and choose accordingly. Either choose those SSPM platforms that are covering those, those ones, or assume that, all the players are covering the main ones. So that's so far so good. moving on to the small ones, the one, those that are maybe not so relevant or not so core, but I'm still worried about because that's what I have.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is either a matter of you should let go, you don't have to really cover 100% of the things, or choose wisely the solutions that can even cover those even partially. I mean, what should be the approach?
Don't let go so easy. The first thing, understand, is it risky? Should you care? Let's put it that way. And the answer to should you care starts with what level of risk you have. For example, as you have here, the risk is high for Relay. What level of risk you have and who is using it? If the entire top management, we have a dedicated tab of VIP. If the entire top management is using it and they're using it for the board, and this is extremely important, even if you have high risk and 10 users, you will not remove this app. So you need to have governance. So you take these decisions, either because you know that you are storing very important data on these apps, great. Or you go through this list and by the risk level and by who is using it, you decide, I want to add these apps into those core apps to take the list of provisioning and basically posture checks and compliance.
Now,
So,
another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Another question that I have, I just saw another one that is popping up, but let me ask mine first, so I won't forget about it. In cloud security, there is something, and Moshe would probably agree with me, some concept called shared responsibility. Unlike the old R&R, roles and responsibilities that are within the organization, usually when using cloud, whether it's IaaS, SaaS, or PaaS, you have shared responsibility. Now, we all know that, or we all understand that part of the responsibility, for example, the resiliency of the platform is on the SaaS provider, obviously. Whether they do it on their own, they are using a decent IaaS or PaaS, whatever the case is, we trust them. Is there a way, a reason, a need to actually map all the shared responsibilities that I have between me and, let's say, Salesforce, and then sit together with the SSPM platform provider and realize whether they fully cover the shared responsibility, my part of the shared responsibility, or is it something that you do? Basically,
Yes.
whenever
So this is, yeah, sorry, go ahead, sorry.
So that's basically the question. Is it something that I'm supposed to do? I mean, in the shared responsibility between me and Reco, should I expect Reco to do the shared responsibility mapping and figure out what needs to be covered by Reco for me? Or is it something that I should do?
So the simple answer is that we do it, and we do it in a very simple way. We have a very methodical approach of implementation plan, because the vast majority of the companies we work with, they are not experts on SaaS. So we are the experts. That's why we are here, and we have an implementation plan. And the tricky stuff is, technically, you're right. I should trust Oracle and Salesforce and Workday and ServiceNow. Do your job. And it's not that they don't care. There's a limit of what they can do. Then there's a limit that costs a lot of money. For example, Shield on Salesforce, and you have other examples. And then this is only one tool. But I have so many, and I don't have the bandwidth and the people to just focus on Salesforce, and another person just focusing on Workday, and another one on NetSuite. So you need something to aggregate it for you, prioritize, and lower the risk as well as the low workload.
I see. Okay, so there is another question by Joss, but I think we will leave it, Joss, for Tal to answer. Again, I already spoke with the panelists before, and anything. So basically, Joss's question is about anomaly detection or alerting or anomalies based on based on what you used to call also ITDR, or identity threat detection and response. He called it in this case user defined detect and respond. And again, Tal will obviously elaborate on that one in his part. So stay tuned to the end, till the end of the webinar. I trust that you will learn much more about it.
Yeah.
So,
but by the way, I can answer on how it looks like, but it's more interesting to understand why and the behind the scenes, and Tal will elaborate.
So go ahead, give your schneckel, give your 2 cents.
No, the simple answer is yes. That's exactly what it does. So it analyzes anomaly behavior in basically learning, comparing person to himself, person to his team members, to the company, and to the baseline we have through this graph and the vast majority of basically so many different connectors. And how to do it in the AI and machine learning, this is exactly what Tal is going to explain.
Okay, so thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Moshe.
Please feel free to contact me or us through the website or directly. Happy to answer more questions and to me directly. Thank you.
Excellent. So Moshe, we go way back, a lot of history together. If you're not familiar with Moshe Ferber, he is the chairman of the Cloud Security Alliance in Israel, but that's not all that he does. So before anything else, Moshe mentioned it, and we'll mention it later on as well. As the leader of the CSA in Israel, he is responsible for lots of documentation, lots of interesting stuff, and working groups about cloud security. So if you ever want to participate, whether by reading or by even contributing, feel free to reach out to him. And again, without further ado, Moshe, I think we are going to be educated by your presentation. So the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. So first of all, Gidi and Lior, thank you for inviting me. Gidi, thank you for hosting this and steering through all the slides and questions. And Tal and Ofer, pleasure to cooperate with you on this session and learn more about Reco. Gidi, I'm not sure I'm able to, yeah, okay, moving my slides. So what I'm going to drill down here is the foundation of cloud monitoring. And more specifically, let me introduce myself, then I'm going to talk about Cloud Security Alliance, and then I'm going to explain what I'm going to talk about. So regarding myself, financial security for over 20 years, I think we're getting through the 25th year by now. In the let's focus on the last 10 years. I've been joining the Cloud Security Alliance, I think, give or take in 2010, something like that, really early in the market adoption of cloud. And I had the privileges of seeing this organization grow and participated in most of the, creating most of the research, not most of that, but big chunk of the certification and research in the Cloud Security Alliance. And I'm happy to talk to you about cloud security also today. Those of you who are not familiar with the Cloud Security Alliance, Cloud Security Alliance is a nonprofit organization. It is built from different community of volunteers around the world, like the one that I have in Israel, the Israeli chapter. But there are over 50 different countries, over 100 different chapters, and many contributors who help the CSA produce best practices. For instance, Tal is part of the AI working group. This is the newest working group for the Cloud Security Alliance. AI is very important for the CSA. First of all, most AI workloads run on cloud computing, makes a lot of sense. Also, it changed the way that we do security, it changed the way that we compute, changed the way that we handle different cloud services. So this is why we are heavily invested on AI. Here in the Israeli chapter, we are building a lot of research ourselves. Here you can see the last 4 publications that we are released. This is done internally in the chapter. Those of you who wish to participate, ping me, direct message me, or even Gidi. Gidi was also part of some of these research papers. And today, by the way, we're working on Cloud Security for Startups version 2. We released the first document about 5 years ago. It helped many startups to build their security. The nice thing about this document that it's describe how you build security into your SaaS based on the different rounds of finance, because this is why startup is different from enterprises. They cannot do everything on the first day. So they have to adapt the maturity of their security based on the money that they have and the customers that they have. And now we're working on the second version of this document. Help is always required. Let's jump in. What am I going to talk about? I'm going to dive into monitoring cloud services. I'm going to start from the left, talking about traditional CSPM that was already mentioned, that stuff that are more into infrastructure and platform as a service. But as we move through the different monitoring tools, I'm going to move more and more into software as a service, which is the topic of this discussion today. And I'm going to give some example of desired SaaS architecture, both for monitoring and also for operational concerns. Just to make sure that we understand the different terminology. So in cloud computing, we have the services that we build our own software on top of them, or we bring our own software. This is infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. You probably encountered with Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud Platform, Microsoft Azure. Those are all infrastructure and platform as a service, and they required mostly different tools than software as a service. What is software as a service? Somebody else build an application and we consume it. So infrastructure as a service, we build our own application. In software as a service, somebody else built the application, we consume it. What is the difference? Well, the shared responsibility is different in IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. In SaaS, most of the responsibility is on the provider, but there is something else that is different. Software as a service, there are many vendors. Almost all software companies today is a software as a service company. And there's a big variety in the market. Some of those providers are very big. They understand cloud. They invest heavily in the SaaS offering. And some of those providers are smaller companies, only doing one niche software, and they don't really understand how to do security well. So an infrastructure as a service, a platform as a service, usually have one vendor inside the organization, maybe two vendors, but it's usually limited number of vendors, and they're usually very big. Amazon, Microsoft, Oracle, those type of vendors. In software as a service, organization will have a lot of different services, and some of them would be from the giants, some of them will be smaller companies, medium-sized companies. So the evaluating the service and the security of it is very different by nature. After all this opening, let's dive into the different monitoring. First of all, let's define monitoring. When we talk about security, when we say monitoring, we usually refer to collecting logs. This is the traditional monitoring. This is usually what we had. We used to collect logs from different applications and services and infrastructure tools, and then we used to aggregate them and correlate them and try to get insights from those logs. The problem is, log is a very bad way to understand what is going on in your environment. Log can tell you that something has changed. It will not tell you what was before. It will not tell you what was after. And it will not tell you what this change means and what is the risk that this change is opening to you guys. So we do collect logs. We invest heavily in forensics and logs and stuff like this. But in cloud environment, this is not the first thing that I'm looking at when I talk about monitoring. Cloud environments are mostly software-based, and every configuration item is collectible, readable, and you can collect it and analyze it. So basically, I can ask questions about the configuration. For instance, how many users I have without MFA, without multi-factor authentication, and can ask the environment questions like, when was the what type of files do I have in my storage? Or what do they contain? Or what type of configuration does my storage have in order to allow external access? So instead of analyzing log, I can simply ask questions like, which user does have an MFA, or which user didn't use his permissions, or where do I have sensitive files? It's a very different way of looking at monitoring than analyzing logs. This way of the way of analyzing configuration and getting insights from the configuration, it's called posture management. Posture is basically the posture of your security. So there is a big number of tools that fall under the category of posture management. And what I'm going to do with in the next slides is overview those different tools. Again, starting from IaaS, PaaS, which is not the topic, so I'm going to run fast on those guys. And then we're going to dive into more SaaS monitoring, which you already mentioned the acronym for that, which is SSPM. So the first family of products that I want to talk about is what it's now called CNAPP, Cloud Native Application Protection Platform. I'm sorry, I'm going to use a lot of acronyms in this slide, not because I like for letters acronyms. It's because this is what the market is currently using, and it's better to understand those acronyms in order to understand what the vendors are talking about. So our journey starts with I think the most traditional and the most foundational product, which is CSPM, Cloud Security Posture Management. Cloud Security Posture Management connects to your infrastructure and platform as a service. It gathers information and detects misconfiguration. Misconfiguration is the biggest attack vector in cloud environment. Most of the attack is because you misconfigure the service and then you open a security breach. CSPM is basically a tool that can help you identify those misconfigurations by reading the configuration, comparing it to a list of controls. For instance, the CSPM can know different controls from different standards like ISO 27001, and then give you some kind of score on your compliance. CSPM is also heavily integrated with workload protection, CWPP. This is why Gartner united those two categories under Cloud Native Application Protector Platform, CNAPP. But I'm still listing the old name as well because some of the market vendors are still using them. CWPP is basically checking the configuration, vulnerabilities, and patches on your workloads. Workloads, virtual machines, containers, serverless applications, those are different workloads. So CWPP together with CSPM gives you visibility, monitoring, and detecting configuration and vulnerabilities inside your IaaS, infrastructure service, platform service. And known vendors in this area is Wiz, Orca, Palo Alto with Prisma, and other vendors you might have heard about. I'm moving on because, again, we are more focusing on SaaS today and not the CSPM. ASPM is also relevant for infrastructure and platform and service. It's the newest member to the family of the posture management. Fastly mentioning what we do on infrastructure and service and platform and service, we develop application. This is what we do. ASPM goal is to manage the life cycle of the security in those development process. For instance, when do I, and how do I do security testing on my code? What is the right moment? How do I verify that all code is passing those security tools? How do I make sure that nobody is injecting code into my code repository without being allowed to? All those questions of application security is usually managed by ASPM. He handles the CI/CD pipelines, the different security checks. And again, this is the newest member in this family. You guys might have encountered cybersecurity acquired by Palo Alto, or Enso that was acquired by SNCC. And moving on again, because we're focusing on SaaS, and the ASPM is mostly for infrastructure and platform as a service. DSPM is currently, I think, the hottest. No, I think it's the second hottest today. But many acquisitions in the last year were around DSPM. DSPM basically inspects your data. It can tell you, for instance, that you have certain files with credit card numbers or other PII options in your OneDrive or your object storage. Usually DSPM vendors are either focusing on infrastructure platform as a service, then they analyze object storage, databases, different type of data. Some of the vendors are more focused on on software as a service, and then they do look at your Google Drive files, the files that you save on your Salesforce, OneDrive, and SharePoint, and stuff like this. And the idea is that they can give you insights to what your data is and adhere to different regulations and privacy laws. DSPM is a bit of a niche, and some of the larger vendors of the CNAPP saying that DSPM is part of their offering as well, but there are also some vendors that offer this offering specifically. Last year, I think we saw Polar Security acquired, and there's another one that was acquired very recently, but I don't remember the details. And I'm moving on to the thing that we gathered here to talk about. So as I said, software as a service is a very big organization. Every enterprise will have tens, if not hundreds, of SaaS providers. The biggest challenge here is that you have limited visibility, already mentioned. You are dependent on the cloud provider. And some of the vendors are good, they give you good tools, and some of them are not that mature, and you need to work on other mitigating controls or compensating controls for your data. The technologies that can help you in analyzing software as a service, posture management, or to analyze misconfiguration, to analyze compliance breaches and security risk is called SSPM, SaaS Security Posture Management. In the past, we used to, a couple of years ago, we used to have a CASB, Cloud Access Security Brokers. SSPM is the next generation of those tools, and they are more focusing. CASB was more focused on access, while SSPM is more focusing on the actual configuration and also looking at wider angles of the SaaS offering, like for instance, different file types and stuff that you install inside your SaaS.
And it's also
Sorry, yeah, Gidi.
It's also worth mentioning that CASBs usually work like proxies, while SSPMs are working completely. Oh, they might do some of this as well, but most of them, and I think at Reco as well, in this case, are using APIs mainly to do those things.
Great comment, because we're also talking about this in the next slide. What important capabilities you need to integrate to your SSPM? So first of all, as I said, you will have tens of SaaS services in your environment, probably. So your SSPM needs to be compatible with most of the services that you need to integrate with. So the wider the list that the cloud provider gives you, the SSPM vendor gives you, the bigger the list that of tools, of services you support, then probably you will find what you need over there. Okay, of course, most of the SSPM supports the biggest like Salesforce and G Suite. But again, you will also have some of the smaller services, and you need to check if the SSPM support them as well. It gives you visibility into what is going on, sometimes better visibility, sometimes even visibility you are lacking in this environment. They give you automated, the ability to automate things, and of course, further analysis. And I think Ofer mentioned this very good, so I'm not going to do this in details. Basically, different SSPMs present different features, but I would say that most of them have e-discovery and classification. E-discovery, okay, let's check your files and see where do you have, for instance, PII, where do you have a project name, for instance, that could be confidential and you don't want to be exposed, and then classify them. For the classification is very much required for later analysis. And some of them can give you a log analysis or ability to produce insights that are that are dependent on the logs coming from the provider. And it's very important to integrate them with additional technologies. For this matter, I produced this slide that talks about how SaaS security architecture should look like. Now, this is like the holy grail of SaaS security. Not all organization needs to implement all of this, and not all organizations need to implement, and not all of them implementing all of this. But I gave you basically the highlights, and you need to pick and choose what you implement to your environment. So Tal already mentioned on the right, we have the identity provider. This is a big cornerstone in SaaS security. Sorry, Ofer mentioned it, not Tal. As Ofer said, for instance, discovery of new SaaS application, the IDP is the best way to do that, because usually all SaaS application will go through the IDP for single sign-on and identity federation. This is a centralized place to check logs. For instance, I want to look for brute force. I want to look for malicious authentication attempts. This is one single point that I'm looking at all the logs. I don't have to go to each SaaS service to do so, because everything will be IDP. This is also the place to enforce my preventative controls. For instance, conditional access. You cannot log in unless you have a certified machine and on antivirus that is updated. This is where I enforce multi-factor authentication on honest variation. This is where I also some of the IDPs have the capabilities to manage your endpoints, to make sure that you're also accessing with the proper authentication, but also with the proper hygiene for your endpoint. So those are all parts of the IDP, and it's a major foundation in your SaaS security. Known IDPs, Azure Active Directory, what else? Okta, OneLogin, Bing Identity. Those are all Google Workspaces. Those are all examples for known IDP. An IDP allows you to maintain identity federation. Identity federation is the tool that helps you to control all your users, both authentication, but also authorization, because you can use the IDP. For instance, you map a certain user to a group in the Active Directory, it can map to a role in Salesforce or in AWS, so it also helps you to manage your authorizations. On the bottom, you see the organizational network, or sometimes people work from home, sometimes people work from shared offices or from the network. The way that they access the SaaS service can be made through secure browsing, new technology today, which also integrates nicely with SSPM and also SaaS. In a moment, I will explain SaaS, but also integrates nicely. Secure browsing gives you a good solution for managing internet risk. For instance, they are able to enforce policy on browser, make sure that when you access a secure server, phishing attempts and or poisoning of the data is less, there's less chances to succeed because of the secure browsing. Usually when we access the SaaS service, in an organization today implement something that is called SSC, or software-defined networking for their branches, or SaaS or Zero Trust Network Access. Those are all technologies that help you to access the internet safely. We used to have all those technologies in our perimeter on our firewall that is in the outside the organization. But since people today have started the perimeter broken, people are working from everywhere, SaaS and /ZTNA provide better access capability to different services. Well, I will not be elaborating on this because this is not the topic today. Our topic is what's on the left. And this is the SSPM that is used to monitoring. This is the third thing on top of the access and the identity that I want to implement. As Gidi was mentioning, SSPM usually connect to via API access to the SaaS service. It means that the SaaS provider needs to build this API. So we're always dependent on the SaaS provider to build an API, to allow access to that, to bring the relevant data to this API. And as Gidi was mentioned, usually CASB was more of a inline, and SSPM is taking more of the API access approach. There are pros and cons for each approach, but I think the market has said clearly API access is much more preferable over inline access. So the SSPM through API gets all the data. It also has access to the identity provider. I was too lazy to draw the arrow over there, but it also has access to the IDP in order to analyze the logs. Actually, for the SSPM, the IDP is another software as a service that it needs to manage. And this is a good place to also to connect my SIEM, Security Information Manager, or in the cloud, we have this new technologies, cloud detection and response, identity threat and detection. We have all those new acronyms that I was too lazy to put on screen. But because SSPM can gather insights from different SaaS services, it can also digest and make sure that those events are real. There is a big advantage into connecting your low connection, your CDR, your SIEM directly to the SSPM, especially because most SaaS services don't produce good logs. The logs are very hard to parse. Also, some of them are the logs required heavier licensing. I think Ofer was mentioning Salesforce Shield, which give you better logging, but it requires double the money on the licenses fee. So this is why SSPM can give us additional benefits on top of this. So this is an example. this is this is an example for an architecture of SaaS. Sorry, I'm reading the questions as we speak. This is an example for SaaS architecture. I'm not sure that every organization need to adopt all of the components here, but yeah, definitely the biggest building blocks are there, and most organizations will adopt them probably. Now this is time for answering the questions.
Yes,
Yeah, it will give us a couple more minutes. So just to summarize before I move into the to see if different type of questions. So cloud monitoring is not only about logs. Logs has an important role, yeah? It's important for forensics. Sometimes you only have logs, but it's also about posture management, which is mean reading the configuration and tell you, this is what you're doing wrong, this is breaking compliance, this is where you can adjust your settings and be more secure. Posture management is very different if we're talking infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, then we're talking CSPM, CWPP, ASPM, or if we're talking software as a service, which is mostly SSPM. SSPM is the biggest building block, and it needs to work together with your IDP, with your secure browsing / zero trust network access on all those different tools that you give to access. Remember, in software as a service, you have 3 responsibilities: the data, identity and access management, managing the roles, setting up authentication, and auditing and monitoring. In the shared responsibility model, this is always your responsibility. So IDP for the identities and SSPM for the data and the auditing and monitoring, those tools will cover this. Regarding the questions,
Vlad asks, and basically that one is the constant argue about CASB or SSPM or both of them. So you mentioned that API is the preferred method for connecting or integrating with all the SaaS platforms, the SSPM to the SaaS platforms, which is the next gen way or the new way, the updated way. What about the prevention? So once you're no longer in line, how do you prevent?
Okay, so let's focus on first of all on the different terms. CASB was also going into 2 ways. Some of the CASB were API based, and some of the CASB were inlines, proxies, inline proxies. It's not true that CASB was. So basically, let's elaborate on this. Inline and API based has a couple of pros and cons. Let's review them quickly. So API based is let's start with inline. Inline can be preventative. In API based, usually you read only the configuration. If you need to do something in the environment, you go and you do it on your own. It's not something that is blocking. It's not something that is changing configuration. So you are correct that API based is when you do API based, you basically don't do blocking, or you do the blocking slower. It's not mandatory, but usually this is what happens. On the other hand, when you have proxy, everything, when you're inline, everything has to go through this inline proxy, which creates operational challenges. How do you make sure you have one user at home, you have one user abroad? How do you make everybody go through a one reverse proxy? This is one challenge. Second challenge is sometimes proxy can miss things, okay? For instance, let's say I'm implementing my proxy today. He will not know what files I have on my Google Drive. He will not know that I have PI either, because proxy only looking at the traffic. So there are pros and cons to both approaches. And I didn't say that API is the preferable method. I said that the market said his word. For a lot of time, we thought about, okay, we don't know who will win. We don't know where the market is going, but it's definitely the market says we don't like the operational burden of having inline proxies, and we prefer API-based. We prefer to sleep quietly at night, knowing that if the SPBN is down, nothing will happen. You think about it in inline, when the tool is down, no traffic. Okay, so we prefer to sleep quietly at night and live without prevention, only to do this API based. But you are correct that prevention is a challenge, Gilad, and I have no answer to that unless Reco will come with some kind of a solution to be both API based and to do faster prevention.
So in a way, there is something in the middle. You mentioned before the architecture that, the typical, the ideal architecture would be with a SaaS or SSC or SASC in the middle. Or we can also call it the next-gen VPN. And many of them has built-in or inline CASB or inline proxy. But again, I think that was one of the main challenges with CASB is that most of the common CASBs back then, and I saw it till that day as well, we're covering only the core system. So the Salesforce of the world, the GitHubs of the world, the main platforms, not the smallest one. So yes, on one side, it allowed prevention. On the other side, it prevented only things or only issues on the main things, which is usually something that handles the internal threat, the insider threat, which is the employees. And with SSPMs, we moved also to things that are happening that are not related to the internal threat. And so maybe the ideal architecture of using SaaS plus SSPM also can provide prevention and inline protection or prevention for the platforms, but again, only for certain platforms, only for the main platforms, not for all of them. So Gilad, hopefully that was answering your question.
Josh also asked how SaaS control access to SaaS application. Well, different implementation for SaaS, but in all implementation, the traffic goes through some kind of a SaaS edge. Either you have a client on your laptop that sends you into a SaaS server, or you have the SaaS connected to your VPN/perimeter. So anyway, the traffic goes to the SaaS, and now you decide, for instance, that in 2 a.m., the users cannot connect to Office 365, but they can work on Salesforce, for instance. So it's up to you, basically, the perimeter of the different the different policies. But the idea is that all the traffic goes through the SaaS, either by an agent or by some kind of a VPN or a private line. Thank you, Avner, for your comments.
Excellent. So without further ado, Tal, you're next in line, just mentioned before, so hopefully you will provide some prevention capabilities. Sorry for that thing. So quickly, let me introduce Tal. He is the smartest guy in the panel and probably in the meetup right now. Tal is the co-founder and CTO of Reco. He has a PhD from the School of Electric Engineering in Tel Aviv University, where his research actually focused on deep learning, computer networks, and cybersecurity. Tal is a graduate of the Talpiot Excellence Program for the non-Israeli Israelis one. It's one of the most luxurious, or probably the most luxurious program before you start serving in the Israeli army. And usually after that program, you can basically ask to go anywhere you want in the Israeli army. He was also the head of the cybersecurity R&D group with the Israeli Prime Minister's office. In addition to serving as the CTO, Tal is a member of the AI Control Framework Working Group that also Moshe mentioned before. It's part of the CSA. And again, if you are not familiar with the CSA, you should totally check it out. And if you're not familiar with the CSA working groups, and you want to volunteer and participate and share your knowledge with everyone else, please reach out to Moshe or me or basically anyone else in one of the working groups. Tal, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Gidi, very much for the introduction. So hello, everyone. And today I'm going to talk a little bit of how we can use AI as a protector or defender. Basically Gidi mentioned, I've been working in the past more than decade on combining or using AI and generative AI for cybersecurity use cases, both in the industry and also in the academy, both as a researcher during my PhD and as a postdoc. A little bit about my research focus, just to show you that there are so many use cases that you can basically leverage AI for them in the cybersecurity space. So I've been using AI both for encrypted internet traffic classification, application identification, and recent research about vulnerability ontology. Basically, how can we predict based on the entire industry if there is a new product that is affected by an existing CVE or vulnerability. Lots of research about IP hijack detection and BGP hijack detection in unsupervised constraint, meaning that we don't have labeled data and we need to be able to detect these attacks in real time, and IoT device labeling, etc. And for this use case and more, I've been using both generative AI, but also AI from different disciplines, such as natural language processing, computer vision, and knowledge graph learning, which I personally think that this is by far the most interesting area. So when a lot have been told about the generative AI, and in the past, since October 2022, many people started using it, both for data and intelligence collection. A lot has been done from the actor perspective for advanced social engineering attack, for sophisticated and dynamic phishing, and also dynamic malware, meaning that the code is changing dynamically to avoid signature, static signature, etc., and many more. But the Gen AI also open a lot of opportunities for us as defenders, both for data enrichment, being able to discover unknown threat in real time. One example is discovering unknown shadow apps that use a generative AI in real time, phishing, malware detection, and a lot for policy and automation, auto generation. And at the end, it can improve productivity and reduce the risk. If you want to learn more, I really recommend to read this blog by the CEO of the Cloud Security Alliance, Jim Revis. HGPT, please help cybersecurity. And also in Reco, like we have been doing it, for example, in Reco, we have a policy, a no-code policy engine. Behind the scene, we are using a JSON format, and in particular, JSON NATA format. And we have been training Gen AI to be able to basically given a query from a user to generate automatically policy. But besides Gen AI, we both use in Reco generative AI and also regular or classic AI technique for detection and response, detecting risk, user anomaly detection, misalignment between user permissions and the role, kind of advanced capability of SSPM, app discovery and consolidation, and a lot of information about a user and identities. In this particular talk, I'm going to focus on how we can leverage AI to detect SaaS session hijacking. So I'm warning you in front, it's going to be deep about the AI perspective. So a little bit about, so basically SaaS session hijacking, it's usually start from a phishing attack and then followed by a man-in-the-middle attack, allow the attacker to basically bypass login credential and MFA, and to gain a direct control of an active session. Using this token, basically, you can access the authorized resources and administrative permission granted to the user. So let's start from the legitimate scenario. Usually in modern enterprises, user connecting or login to an application using the identity provider, IDP, it could be Microsoft, Okta, Ping Identity, and more. Basically, this is like the simplest process. The user login to the IDP with credential and ideally with MFA. Then the IDP provide the user and also the application, the specific application authentication token, in which the application can then verify the user based on the session token, and the user from now on can act and log into the specific application. So in order to hijack a session, the attacker will attempt to insert themselves between the user and the IDP to get into the middle of the process. So the trigger usually will be a phishing. It could be via email or via social networks or IM. In the simple man-in-the-middle scenario, attacker will create, this is a real example from Microsoft, will create a persuasive phishing method to basically trick the user to click on a malicious link. And then the email redirect the user to a seemingly legitimate login screen, which proxies the traffic. And to the user, everything will look and appear normal. Usually, when we talk about a specific link, like in this example, when you click on the Keep My Password button, it points to a URL, and it looked trusted, but then basically the attacker will hijack an actor control domain, usually will be generated using a DGA algorithm, and this will redirect the user to the malicious website. And then will be the session hijacking, and this is like a kind of in a nutshell process. So the user logging into the site provided by the phishing attack. There is a reverse proxy by the attacker that relays the request to the service and intercepting credential. The IDP basically will respond to the man-in-the-middle request. Then it will allow basically the attacker to capture the token, and the man-in-the-middle will relay the response from the IDP back to the user, and basically it can from now on use the capture session to authenticate as the user. The result, the attacker intercepts a number of sensitive details, in particular the user IP, credential, and most importantly, the session token. It will allow the attacker to authenticate in the user session without ever needing login credential or MFA token, basically until the session will be expired. So this is another reason why it's important to make sure that there is a short expiration time for session. And this is like a real life example taken from basically from what known from the news about the MGM cyber attack. So basically the attacker scanned LinkedIn for MGM employee, basically looking for a privilege employee that may have access to Okta. The IT helpdesk vendor, it was targeted by impersonating privileged MGM user and asked basically the IT helpdesk to reset MFA. Then the attacker basically used it to, like we say, to actually do the session hijacking, then log into the Okta. From this point, from Okta admin, it was able to basically remove MFA to other admins and then gain domain admin privilege control. And then because in large enterprises, usually the IDP connected between each another through the Okta IDP, you may able to connect to control additional IDP. It's called, in Okta, they call it org-to-org host. And now the actor find himself have full control on the second IDP, which is basically became a global administrator in the Azure Active Directory. And from this point, it allowed the attacker to encrypt servers, distribute critical application. So the MGM decided to basically shut down a lot of the services to avoid it from being spread, and the rest we all know. So this is basically a real life example. And why is it so hard to detect? So basically, usually is often executed discretely. It's difficult to detect because the attacker reuse a legitimate token and can establish persistent and connected application. And these are the current, I just listed some of the current common detection method. So there is the impossible travel activity, assuming that you are looking on the audit log and seeing like someone that access Okta, for example, from anomalous IP geolocation, irregular time pattern, logging from an unrecognized or unmanaged device, and also suspicious mail for activity like forwarding, etc. But the problem with the existing solution is that we are living in an hybrid workforce environment. It means that employees legitimately use devices like and many type of user agent, unmanaged device. They're using both from mobile, desktop, multiple clients you can access from application and from the browser, and different client for the specific application, multiple networks like from the office, from the home, from the organization VPN, for example, through AWS. Also, from the host 2, you give the application permission, legitimate permission to act on your behalf. So you can, if you look at the audit, you can see IPs that belongs to the specific third-party application that connect to your core application, and also working from home for office on the fly and working all the time. So time pattern are not useful anymore or not useful by themselves. So the result is that you try to have like a rule-based policy for each of these heuristic. You will find yourself with a lot of false positive and alert fatigue. So you need to find a way to actually reduce the noise and being able to detect such activities in an efficient way. And this is some example like of this kind of scenario. Let's say that there is a user in the Active Directory and the user like use, for example, Microsoft 365, and the users can access their email from via Outlook, but they have a third-party app, for example, Superhuman, and they prefer to use Superhuman as the client, so they can use also as a desktop app, and also from the mobile device, from iOS, for example. But they also gave the specific application authorization via host2 app-to-app connectivity, so you can see there are a lot of traffic and audit originated from the IP that is related to Superhuman that will enable them to sync the inbox. So these are the legitimate usage that can trigger false session hijacking alerts, and we want to be able to avoid them. So this is a solution that we decided to embrace in Reco, and it is an identity-focused solution. Basically, we want to build a user baseline and organization baseline. How? In a nutshell, 3 steps. The first one is to build a temporal organizational knowledge graph or network graph based on entities and activity from the vast core SaaS application. The second step is identity consolidation. Be able to correlate all the identity with the related accounts, like taking account from all of the different applications and make sure that, okay, all of these belong to the same person. And using AI or graph machine learning models in particular to correlate identity with the activities, IP, location, devices, third-party app, being able to build the baseline and look for major changes over time. For one of the steps, which is the identity consolidation, I will give an example. In this particular example is about machine identity or application consolidation. So when you're talking about application in SaaS, there are 2 formal users. First one is human that actually connect to this specific application via IDP or social login. And there is the machine to machine, SaaS to SaaS connectivity using host2. And these are the application that we want to be able to map and also consolidate. A short recap about terminology. Generative AI is basically a type of AI that can produce various types of content, basically generate content like text, image, audio, and synthetic data. Retrieval augmented generation is a specific way to use a generative AI. It's an AI framework that basically enables the LLM, large language model, to retrieve information in real time based on external knowledge. And then the LLM is being able to get this information and do what we also call in-context learning, and basically provide an answer based on this information as well. So this is like example from behind the scene from the graph. We have seen, for example, many type of application that connected to Google, but also many type of applications that connect to Microsoft. There are many applications, all of them or most of them have different names, but although that usually they are the same, they belong to the same vendor, they are the same application, and we want to be able to consolidate the identity. So this is the way that we do it in Reco, using, like I say the retrieval augmented generation. So every app instance that we ingest from every basically source that we support we enrich, then we embrace generative AI to create generic app ID. Like this is internal ID that we use in Reco to combine and consolidate. And we also, in parallel, we also apply similarity search to be able to match the new application, the new app instance, to app instances that we already have seen in the past. An example of basically semantic similarity search. So when we talk AI, when we talk LLM, when we talk generative AI, AI basically, or deep learning model, they work well with numbers. Like it's much easier to measure distance or similarity using vectors of number. So every word, for example, in computer vision, every image is basically being embedded into a vector, also called embedding. And this vector have meaning, and we aim that this vector will capture internal characteristic, and when we talk about natural language processing, we aim that word or text that have semantic similarity, their vector will also be similar. So basically, we text the enrich app name, we embed using GenAI model to a new space. And this, for example, you can see that application that's related to the same application are very close to each other, although, for example, they have like a very different name. For example, Gmail Lightning Sync and Salesforce Connector, both of them are Salesforce applications. So this is one example. And basically, the result is being able to consolidate. For example, in the Zoom example, you can see that even in the specific connector, like Google, there are different names, and we are able to connect all of them. And of course, this is basically the simple case. And this is at the end how it looks in the product. So why is consolidation so important? And in particular, for machine identity and human identities. So the first answer is that it enables us to do cross-app analysis, in which sometime when we run heuristic on account level, these activities can be legitimate, but when we look at the identity level perspective, usually is not. For example, user is logged into multiple accounts via Israel, while there is a specific account which the user is suddenly being logged in via Russia, via another country. So this is like very weird. And the second thing is that will enable us to build a baseline to remove a lot of noise, like I showed you before. Recap about knowledge graphs. So knowledge graph are graph. Graph usually add node like the circle or entities and edges, but in the particular case of knowledge graph, there are also relationship, like the edges themselves and as have meaningful, they are called relationship. So we can see like an add, relationship, and tail. For example, company located in specific city, and at the right side of the screen, like here, you can see like an example from the behind the scene of our knowledge graph taken from Neo4j. Knowledge graph representation learning is a type of machine learning process in which basically at the end, we want to generate representation for graph, for node, from relationship, this representation like you see are basically the embedding that we can then use for many type of analysis. A graph neural network are type of machine learning which know how to take as an input graph. And this is like a simple approach in which, for example, you want to take prediction of the red node. So the graph, like the graph convolution layer, basically aggregate all the information from all the neighbors. And at the end, being able to generate a vector of representation for the specific node, which allow you also to predict a specific label if you train this specific network as a classifier, for example. From knowledge graph, it looks the same, while this time you don't only embed nodes, you embed also the relationship, and you try embed and train the network in a way that you can run arithmetic operation on the specific vector. I will show you, this is an example for intuition why it can work and why it's worked well. So these are real examples. For example, you take the vector that represents Obama, you take the vector that represents the nationality, and you sum these two vectors and you get a vector of American. And you can see here also another example from word to vec. If you subtract men from king and add woman, you get the vector of queen. So this is our motivation, and this is what we do behind the scene in Reco. But in Reco, we apply temporal knowledge graph learning, in which the vector is being changed all the time. So every time we have a specific vector, for example, for each user, so let's call it VT, the identity observed at time t. And if we want to have the baseline of the organization, the simple way to do it is just take an average of specific time of all the vector of all the employees in the company. Of course, you can do it for a team, for a group, for a department, for a site, and also for external domain. And then there are multiple approaches that we can use dynamically to look for major change. For example, we can see that the difference between a vector of a specific user in a specific time is much, much, much higher than the difference between the organizational baseline, how the organization has been changed in the same time. And we can also use knowledge graph representation learning, like I'm taking the vector of the specific user plus login, subtract the IP of the specific time. If it's very, very large, if like the distance is huge, I can see, oh, there is a problem. Like it doesn't make sense that Tal is currently being logged in, and I don't know, from Russia or something else. Another option is to use, many people are aware of the problem of link prediction, but there is also the problem of unlinked prediction. It means that I predict that there could not be a relation or a connection between the specific user and the specific account, or the specific user or the specific location. And this is example of this vector behind the scene, and we can see that when there is issue, like for example, here when I add the red circle, it's very far from the regular pattern. So it's captured like when something happens, it's much, much easier to see it in the embedded space than by looking at audit logs. And these are the result in our some screenshots taken from our product based from the connection between different alerts at the same time and the identity consolidation. And this is the way that basically we map the MGM bridge into a lot of policies, and there are many more, specifically in Okta, that basically cover all of the steps that are aware that were during the MGM result, and also some best practices offered by Okta themselves. So key takeaway: attacker cleverly insert them between user and IDP, start from a phishing attack and then made in the middle. It's hard to detect. Attacker reuse legitimate token, and due to the dynamic nature of current organization and hybrid warfare, the current heuristic and rule-based policy result with many false positive. Using AI technology can basically help detect SaaS hijacking and other sophisticated attack in near real time. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tal. That was really educative. Though, again, some of the slides obviously are much more complicated to understand. So if you are lacking some experience or understanding of how LLMs work or what is Gen AI behind the scenes, again, you can go read about it a bit, hear some podcasts about it, and then get back to the recording that, as mentioned before, will be provided to you on our Meetup website. So now to a few questions. Let's see. Okay, Josh asks, can the Reco platform? Okay, that's the question that was asked, that the author was asked, and they said that I think it would be better to answer during your session or after your session. So, can your platform basically detect anomalies and assist with detection of anomalies on sensitive data? So a user that is trying to do something to sensitive information, but in a different way that they usually do.
Yeah, so there is the usual way to do anomaly. For example, basically you track specific metrics on specific on every user, like all the time, and then, like, for example, this user is usually downloading let's say 10 files per day, and now we have seen that suddenly the user download 100 files. So we do basically track all of this metric to basically allow our customer to be able to define their own policy and use like dynamic threshold and dynamic threshold that are basically adapted for every specific user based on the consolidation. But we also do it like in the embedding space, like I told you, basically being able to see, oh, there is a huge difference between the user or the specific action. Like the same way that I can embed the user, I can also embed each event, and I see, oh, there is a huge gap, and the result is basically also being able to capture all of this anomaly. But usually, most of the things, when we actually investigated these cases with our customer, we seen that this was used real events, and the false positive has been reduced dramatically.
Excellent. Another question is, can you provide visibility into attacks against the business processes, for example, HR, onboarding, offboarding, moving from between departments, financial business processes like accounts payable, things like this, sales, etc.
So, like I said, one of the ways also being able to map or build a baseline, not only for a specific user or the entire organization, but you can also build a baseline for a specific business process, and being able to see either a dramatic change or a specific identity that via communication or collaboration pattern started to interact with the specific business process, and we see that there is a huge difference, like I show you in the graph, like there is a huge difference, and this is also one of the way that we use basically to map, and also we have a published pattern for this specific business processes that allow you to being able to detect, for example, a user that had access to a data, although the user is not part of the business process that is related to this data. I hope that I answered this question.
So basically, just to try to summarize it in a different way, you are agnostic to the specific business process. So I don't need to first map how the business process looks like. Because you can learn over time how it should look like, then you find the abnormalities in the pattern, and you can immediately color them. In this case, not in a different color, but as you showed before, far away from the rest of the vector.
Yeah.
Excellent. And I assume that one also okay, so that's one interesting one. I assume it's not relevant. So is your focus is to provide visibility on attacks against SaaS apps that exploit vendor published vulnerabilities and to display the attack path and how to stop them? No, so in this case, obviously, it's not the case. Again, just I think that one is more relevant for IaaS and PaaS solutions, and those should be run by the SaaS provider itself. So as a SaaS provider, let's say you're Salesforce, you should have your own IaaS or PaaS a security layer, like Moshe mentioned before, the CSPM or CWP, in order to figure out if someone is trying to exploit a vendor published vulnerability. So that's more like an infrastructure and platform, less of a SaaS, because usually for SaaS, you hardly have non-vulnerabilities, or whatever you have is under the shared responsibility under the vendor side, not yours. Next one is, do you learn the normal behavior baseline and alert the platform use of high-risk activity in the SaaS apps of an organization? So yes, George, I think sorry for stealing your answer in this case, Tal. That's exactly what Tal was talking about the entire session. So that's how it works, basically. Look for abnormalities, but instead of the need to study or the need to train it, it's automatically being trained.
And it's dynamic, like the thresholds are dynamic and being changed all the time.
By the way, how much time it takes to actually learn it? I mean, do I need to run it for an hour, a day, a week?
Yeah, so last week when they published, so since the publish of ChatGPT, usually when people think about generative AI, they think about text, also about like a vision, like DALL-E, etc. But there is also fascinating field in knowledge graph that is called like generative AI or building a fundamental model for graph or for knowledge graph, and this is exactly what we basically try to do. So the inference, basically, you can do it all the time in no time, and you train the graph in a way that it learns to understand organization in a general way, and then like you don't need, basically you train it all the time, but you don't need like let's say 5 years ago you have actually to train the model all the time to study the specific like every single time. Now you can move a lot of the work for basically for the inference.
So basically, it's a continuous training plus a general training. So basically, you bring what you learn already from the world to any organization that is using it.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. And last question, at least for now, by Michael. What is the improvement you were able to achieve in FP creation by using knowledge graph based on anomaly detection?
So we are talking about the false positive, let's say comparing a rule-based versus this dynamic policy. So it was dramatic, like it was a gain of let's say around at least 90% like better reduce of the false positive in comparing to even comparing to dynamic threshold, regular dynamic threshold. So yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting. And Michael, hopefully that helped answering your question. So unless there are more questions, again, feel free to also reach out to any of one of the panelists later on. That was today's meetup. Again, reminding you all that we have the contest and there is a swag, a cool swag. So either scan that QR code or you can find a link in the chat. Lior, if you can put it again in the chat, that would be awesome. And good luck for those that will win it. Maybe there is another question. No, just thanks for the answer. So that's amazing, and thanks Josh for participating and asking all those questions. And lastly, and before we send you all to your way, either to back home or to your bed or to start the day, like Ofer, for example. Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure. Hopefully you learned a lot. Thanks, Ofer. Thanks, Moshe, and thanks, Tal, for those sessions. And thanks, Lior, for leading the meetup itself, the entire meetup group. Again, join us. The recording will be uploaded to that link. And stay tuned. We are already working on the next couple of meetups that are coming right away. I mean, just around the corner. And with that being said, have a good day, good night, wherever you are. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.